Hello Wizards and welcome back to Economics for Grade 12. We've previously gone through a few graphs and charts that you would need to understand. Now we're going to take a look at different types of market structures for your topic on economics. So there are 4 different types of market structures. There's perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. Perfect competition means that they have enough businesses that a single business can't influence the market price. It means that there's already perfect competition and competitors all have the same prices in a market. Homogeneous products are created and anyone can freely enter and exit the market. For example, if all traders sell vegetables or fried food, then it'll be the exact same vegetables and fried food that's sold throughout. So the exact same ingredients, the exact same method used to make and prepare everything is used. So all the variables in order to prepare what is being sold is exactly the same. The ingredients can also be the same because everyone's selling the same product and there's no control over the price change, and it'll be unfair to charge different prices for the exact same verbatim good. So that would be perfect competition. If you look at monopolistic competition, this contains a very large number of businesses and each of the products differ. For example, tea. There'll be different flavors of tea and it's not the exact same product as the competitors. Your lager tea is completely different to your Five Roses tea. So there's a free entry in the market, and you can note to yourself as well as to businesses that competitors can actually attract potential buyers, but it's not the same product that's being sold verbatim anymore. So there's very little control that producers actually have over the price change. Then you have oligopolies and monopolies. Now, oligopolies have few businesses where each business must take the actions of the other into account. So the products that are sold may be similar and are sometimes even homogeneous. So market entry is restricted and firms in an oligopoly have very little control over their price. They have to keep in mind the few competitors that they do actually have. And remember, each business needs to take the next business into account. So an example of an oligopoly would be cell phone networks like Vodacom, Cell C, MTN, Telkom Mobile, and Airtel. Each of these firms sell data and they sell airtime for communicating over phones and other devices. They're very similar as they're all networks, but all their prices vary. They still need to take into consideration what each of the other networks are doing. Lastly, monopolies. Monopolies are a single business that is running completely in charge of their own product. The product is unique and there's no other substitutes for this product. There's no other choices that a business can have. Everyone supports solely that firm, and the price determination is quite considerable. Any market entry is then blocked, so nobody can now enter and be a competitor without their authorization. So an example of a monopoly would be Eskom. A good example of a monopoly would be Eskom. So if a massive change occurred in a monopoly and competitors then arise into the market then goes from a monopoly, which is a single running business in charge of a product, to an oligopoly where there are many other businesses involved. Next, we look at your output, your profits, your losses, and your supplies. So for an individual business, there's a short-term equilibrium position. If you look at economic profits, we've got a graph up for you where your x-axis has your quantity and your y-axis has your price of goods. If you see in the blue shaded area, that would be your cost of your goods. And in the light red shaded area, that would be your profit made. So once you've achieved a price that is higher than the cost of your goods, from the cost of your goods up until the price that your product is being sold at would be the profit that you're making. So if you look at this graph, at the point Q in this graph, so you have your revenue, which is equal to your cost. This is where your profits are maximized. So MR is equal to MC, which is where your profits are then maximized. If you look at your next graph, which is economic losses, so this is completely different than profits, because remember, profits mean that you're making more revenue than costs and you're maximizing your production. In this graph, you've got economic losses. So in a perfectly competitive firm, you can see your economic loss is due to the fact that you're not making as much revenue as the cost that you're spending. So your market price is represented by MC is equal to MR, and that's the point at which MC intersects your point P, which is represented by the red dot in the middle. So if you look at your normal profits, a firm makes normal profits when total revenue or total income is equal to your total costs, or when your average revenue is equal to your average cost. Remember, total is all added together, and average is each cost added together divided by the total number of costs that you may have. Your normal profit is the maximum return of the owner, and the firm expects to receive a certain profit. So therefore, in order to keep on operating in the industry that they're working in, they expect to receive a certain profit, and that's called your normal profit. If you look at the industry, the long-term equilibrium for the industry and the individual firm itself, the impact of entry and exit on the equilibrium of the firm and industry, as well as the impact of the entry or exit of the individual business. So you have individual businesses, you have a specific firm or a specific industry that sells certain products. Profits are a signal for the entry of a new business. Because remember, if you're starting up a new business and you're not running at a profit, then it wouldn't be wise to continue. Losses are a signal for businesses to then leave the market because you're not making any money. The long-term equilibrium in the perfect market will be influenced by either profits or losses, depending on the business, the industry, or the firm itself. So let's look at an entry in the apple market. If, for example, farmers earn a profit at the equilibrium and new farmers then enter into the market, there'll be more apples that are supplied. So it's the same type of good, but different people are supplying it. The market supply curve will then shift down since the quantity has now increased. And the equilibrium will also shift down because the farmers will then make a normal profit rather than a higher profit because there was less competition before. If you look at an exit from the apple market, farmers that make economic losses, and some farmers might need to even leave the industry because there's so many people that are selling the same type of goods. There'll be fewer farmers, therefore there'll be fewer apples that'll be produced or even supplied to consumers. The supply curve will then shift upwards because there'll be less of a supply, more of a demand, and then your quantity has decreased. So the equilibrium then also shifts, and the farmers then earn a normal profit. Lastly, if you look at long-term equilibrium, your normal profit occurs at the point of equilibrium itself. So the supply curve of an individual firm is what we're going to have a look at next. The short-run supply curve of an individual producer is that part of the marginal cost curve that's above the minimum average variable cost. So this starts from the shutdown point and onwards or upwards. Below the shutdown point, the firm won't sell any goods. A firm will only sell goods if the price is above the shutdown price level. Reason being is, like we've just discussed, there needs to be a profit because a business will exit the market if they are not running at a suitable price for them to continue to run in the future. So let's look at the shutdown or closing down point. A firm will shut down if it can't meet its average or its total variable costs. Remember, we said revenue needs to be more than costs, and in order for revenue to be more than costs, it means that we need to continue running as a business. However, if it doesn't meet its costs, then there'll be an actual shutdown, which would only take place when your total revenue is less than your total variable costs, or your average revenue is less than your average variable costs. So if you look at the speech bubble, it says TR less than TVC, which means your total revenue is less than your total variable costs. and AR is less than AVC, which means your average revenue is less than your average variable cost. So how exactly do you draw graphs in order to show the different equilibrium positions? First, you draw your two axes. Like we said, your horizontal axis is your quantity, which is your x-axis, and then your y-axis, which is your vertical axis, will then be your price. Remember that they meet at an origin, and the origin that they meet at is always noted as 0. So the labeling of the axis is not the same for all graphs. If you show different equilibrium positions, then different sequences will be followed. In showing the various equilibrium positions, the sequences that you should follow is, firstly, you need to draw the demand curve, followed by your marginal revenue curve. That would be in your perfect market. Remember, that would be your perfect market with perfect competition, where your demand curve is equal to your marginal revenue, which is equal to your average revenue. So this is noted as D is equal to MR, which is equal to AR. Then you would draw your AC curve, which is your average cost curve. Then you would draw your marginal cost curve, which must cut out the average cost at the curve of its minimum point. You then identify what would be your point where you would maximize profits, meaning your cost is equal to your revenue. So what you're receiving is equal to the amount that you're spending. So this is before you've even achieved a profit. You then determine what quantity you'd need to sell, where you draw a line from your x-axis. Remember, your x-axis is your quantity and your y-axis is your price. So determining how much you need to sell or the quantity you need to sell would be from your x-axis point. You then need to determine the price that you're selling goods at. Remember, when your revenue is equal to your costs, that would be the price that you need to just barely break even. Anything above that would be your profit in between your cost and your revenue. Remember, which means you need to have a higher price in the market. Lastly, you would compare your revenue or prices to your costs in order to determine profits or losses. If it's below the line, remember, it means there's a loss. If it's above the line of your prices, it means there's a profit.
We need to learn to live with the COVID virus, the new normal, at least for the next few months. And we have just what you need to make sure you never miss a single school lesson. And it's absolutely free, mahala! High quality, powerful, animated lessons for all your subjects. So don't spend a cent until you have tried iWhiz. It's everything you need. All video lessons, textbooks, workbooks, exam prep. We want you to ace 2021.